Hey, everybody. Welcome to the In All Things podcast. It's time to see God in everything.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the In All Things podcast. My name is Steve Markle, and I'm here today with another special guest.
Yes.
What is your name?
My name is Christy Johnson.
I think a lot of people know you, and I'm glad to have you. This is week number 2 of my 4-week takeover from Mitch as the host, and excited to have a different guest each week. So Christy has been on the podcast before, once or twice?
A couple times.
Yeah, you led the podcast once with Amy,
For
and
Mother's Day,
yeah, that was cool. I was really one of our most highest watched episodes.
I mean, of course.
Whenever we
It's
have,
women.
I know, whenever we have girls on, it goes way up. So glad to have you. Let's just talk about the weekend for a moment, like we like to do. So what did you do this weekend besides church yesterday?
Yeah, so on Saturday, went to North Market.
Okay.
Haven't been there in a minute. It was fun. And then yesterday after church, my small group went to see Jesus Revolution.
Yes. I had in my notes to ask you about that because you told
Yeah.
me you were going. So what did you think?
I liked it a lot. There was a couple parts that I was like, but then they kind of brought it back in. I don't know. I don't want to spoiler alert, but there was a part where the main guy was kind of getting too much. This is about me, and that was bothering me. And I was like, oh dang! And then they brought it around to where the other guy like called him out.
Okay.
On, you really think you're that important? But probably my favorite line was they were talking about like the truth and lies and how quiet the truth is and how loud lies are.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, that's so true in all aspects of life. Like the truth and the positive is usually quiet and the negative is so loud in our world.
That is true. I've heard from a lot of people that have seen it that said it's really good. And,
Yeah.
you know, with Christian movies, we're always skeptical because sometimes they're just done poorly, but
It was done well. No
Yeah.
like cheesy acting in
Right.
it. They were great. Like not many famous people, couple, but they were all really good. I liked it a lot. Everyone in my small group liked it. Lots of tears. You could hear people sniffing.
yeah. Had another church member last night texting me, asking me, what do you think about it? I said, I haven't seen it yet, but he said he went last night and there was a lot of crying in the theater. It was really emotional. My dad and mom went and they said it was really good. Just a wide variety of ages have told me it's really good. So
It would have been fun to do it as a staff. 'Cause
Yeah.
then we could have like talked about it, how we like to like.
right.
Yeah.
It came kind of out of nowhere to me. Like, you know, some things get a lot of hype, but I didn't really hear that much about it leading up. But then now that it's been out, it's, I think, done better than people expected.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So
was
you did that with your group. Did you guys go hiking this weekend too?
We did on Saturday. It was 37 degrees.
Wow.
I'm
Yeah.
a little crazy, and my husband luckily is up for all my craziness. So we did like one round, and we did Chestnut Ridge. I don't know if you've been there, but
No.
it has a pretty long, steep hill on one side that's a little bit challenging. And so then I'm like, let's do it again. And so we did a shorter route the second time, but it was 37 and it was cold.
Yes.
But we survived. So
This weather is weird right now, right? It's
Yeah.
that we had yesterday morning. You texted Jared and I are like, well, it's snowing and it's time change Sunday. That might affect our attendance, and did it? Yes, especially at 9:30.
Yeah.
Our first service was obviously affected by the cold and the time change. 11 o'clock looked like it
Yeah.
has looked, but we've been this year in an attendance surge, wouldn't you say?
yeah, I mean, I don't know what to nail it on.
Yeah,
I'd like to take all the credit with all the fun things
think
we did
so.
last year.
I think it's a accumulation of doing a lot of things that are outreach to the community, and we've been praying for growth. God gave us this building. There's community growth, all these new housing developments around us. So anyway, yesterday was the week before. We had a record attendance since COVID. If you don't count Easter or Christmas in the last year, it was our biggest day. So that was pretty exciting out of nowhere, and guests just come and come and come, and so that's really cool. Yesterday was kind of like, all right, back down to earth a little bit, but still, it was a good day.
Yeah,
So,
it was still good. Second service was I sat in a different spot, like towards the back. I usually
Yeah.
sit in the front, and I'm like, wow, it's pretty. Like if you came in when the lights were out, you would need help, or
Oh, yeah.
you'd need help finding a
Right,
seat. So
right.
I was like, wow, this is just awesome. I don't know what the movement is or why people are
Right.
starting to come back, or if it's at all the churches or
Yeah, when I talk to other pastors, I hear a lot of that. You know, a lot of times, beginning of the year, people start back, but even people have said things like, you know, I feel safe now from COVID. I'm like, really now?
Yeah.
But hey, you know, everybody's different about that. So it's exciting to see. So we just started a new series last week called Seek and Save from the book of Luke. And yesterday I preached on the Good Samaritan. And in that, one point stuck out to me as something that relates a lot to you and something that you're really good at. You know which one I'm thinking of? I was talking about how the Good Samaritan, the 4 S's, I said, be sensitive, be sympathetic, be spontaneous, and be sacrificial. And I thought the one thing that I find that I struggle with the most is helping and being spontaneous. Like I'm sensitive and I sympathize with people, but I always feel like, wow, I got something else on my schedule right now. I can't just stop and do something. I feel like you do a good job at being spontaneous, especially with the Brock Strong Foundation.
Yeah, I really try to be. I feel like those are things when you were talking that I strive to be. Like I just, I'm just naturally someone who wants to make other people happy and someone who wants to serve. But with the Brock Strong Foundation, and I guess just what I've been through, I've been more aware of things and the timing of things. And I'm a big believer where if God puts something on your heart, text someone right away, whatever, because you're going to get busy and forget. And so I try to do that. A good example of that is last week we have a boy in our community who has cancer, and you know, everyone rallies. People are great for all the bad that you see in the world. People are really great when something like that comes around. So they get a GoFundMe and they make this GoFundMe, and people are so amazingly generous. And so I'm like, I'm just going to do something today. So I randomly went out shopping, bought toys, games, snacks, gift cards, and I take this family that I barely know, Facebook friends. I take them this huge gift basket full of like $1,000 worth of gift cards, and got to speak to the dad and just talking to him and seeing like the pain and the hurt, and also how blown away he was by people. Like he didn't know what to think. It's very humbling when you're in that position to accept help, take help, ask for help. But in those situations, you don't know what else to do. People don't know what to do. There's nothing anyone can really do medically to help him. So all people can really do is try to give. And so I was so glad I did that in the moment. Like, you know, I had a million things going on, but I'm like, I'm taking Mitch dinner that night, all these things going on. I'm like, I'm just going to do it because I think I should.
I think that's the last point I made was about sacrifice, and then, but the blessing that you get from it. And I think that's the hardest part for people to see is almost always you feel this blessing afterwards. And it's not like you get repaid for it financially or a gift comes back to you, but the joy that comes from doing something for others.
Oh yeah, especially because I've been there. I mean, not in his exact situation, but you know, I've been there going through everything with Brock, and I know how you feel, and I know how good it is to talk to someone who's kind of been there and actually knows what you're going through. Who doesn't just say that and just, you know, I never try to have the perfect words because there aren't any, but just trying to say, gosh, I know how you feel, and I'm sorry, and I'm just praying for some peace.
That's good. I mean, that is a great situation to be involved in because you know what's going on, and it's kind of almost like a vetted situation. So in my small group last night, we're doing discussion of these sermons. So it was interesting because as we got into it, the opportunities that come up and a lot of us have to face is being at the gas station, pumping our gas, and some stranger comes up and asks for money.
Yeah.
And how do you handle that? Somebody in our group said, like, somebody started walking towards me and I said, no. And then he said, I drove away and I felt so bad. I drove back to see if the person was still there. But they just go from one person to the next. And then you're wondering, are they going to take the money and buy, you know, alcohol and cigarettes with it?
Yeah, it's so hard. I truly feel like you're going to have that feeling what you're supposed to do. So we were at the North Market. We're parking, and there's a man standing by the trash can. Yelling for something. I'm just trying not to make eye contact because I feel unsafe. And he's fastening his pants and his belt, and then he unfastens his belt. So I'm like, I'm not sure what's about to happen, but I'm averting my eyes. And so in that situation, I had no inkling to help him. I just felt like almost unsafe. But there are times when I see someone and I just have this urge to do it. And my philosophy is when you get that, you do it. And if they buy drugs or whatever with that money, that is not on you. You've done what you felt like, you know, you were told to do. And just be wise. It's hard in this day and age. Like in Jesus Revolution, someone's driving and the guy that plays the main guy in there is walking, and she stops and picks him up and gives him a ride. And of course, this is in 1970 something where everyone loved each other. And, but we were talking in the car on the way home how that's so dangerous to do now. Like, unfortunately, because of social media and news, like, we know what's going on in the world. And I would never tell if I had a daughter, I don't, but if I did, to pick up some strange man on the interstate. So it's kind of like we're jaded, but also I feel like we need to be wise. And a lot of it is just listen to that inner feeling in our gut.
When you heard, if you remember in the message, I told the story of something that just happened in the news with the NFL player from the Vikings who stopped with his Uber driver to help somebody whose car was on fire alongside the road. My teenage son, he said, I looked it up. That story really happened. I said, what do you think? I made it up. He's like, he told me the name of the guy and all about his NFL stats. I was like, that's not the point. But the point is, would we do something like that? Would we see like an accident or something and there's no emergency response there? Would we think about stopping? And in my group last night, one man said that he did that before in an accident. It was right. He was there right after it happened. And he said, I was there and another guy who had no medical training. He said, but this guy's leg was bleeding out. He said, I took off my belt and made it in a tourniquet and tied it real tight. And he said, I helped save his life. He said, I didn't even know what I was doing. He said, but I was scared, but it felt really good. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been in a situation like that?
No. So Terry would be the one to stop.
Okay.
Even though I might, depending on the situation, wonder, because you hear, again, like people will fake it.
Right.
And then they steal you. I don't know what they're going to do with you, but Terry would be the one to want to do that. I'm probably a little more cautious on that side, although I want to. If I see like someone pushing a car off the side road, I don't get out and help, but I'm always like, Terry, go help them push that car off the side of the road. I don't know. It's so...
The fear is a thing, right? Like, not just like, should I get involved? Are they taking advantage of me? But is there a fear of something bad happening to me if I get involved? And yesterday in the message, I talked about all the thoughts that the Good Samaritan could have had. There could be people waiting. And Sherry, like in the afternoon when we were talking about it, she called me out, not called me out, but said, do you ever think about how you tell a story like that? She said, all pastors do this, but this was just a story Jesus told. These weren't real people.
Yeah.
So the guy didn't have all those thoughts. I was like, yeah, I know what you're saying, because we try to evaluate all the things he could have thought. He couldn't have, because he wasn't real. It was a made up story. But anyway, I think that there are fears that keep us from...
And I think a lot is just the time we live in. Again, I feel like this wasn't like that years ago. I remember I was at Dairy Queen with my mom. I was young, probably elementary school. And there was a gas station next door, and a guy was going really fast and did a wheelie. And it used to be those big metal plates where they put the gas in the ground.
Oh, yeah.
He hit that and went through the gas station window. Ooh. And so his arm, and it wasn't like the shatterproof glass that we have now. And so all I remember being young is seeing like literally the blood come down through the water when they're washing things away. And my mom went in there and held his arms up for him and sat. I mean, I guess we knew him from being in our city, but she held his arms up, and because of that, he didn't have to have his arms. She helped save his arms.
Wow.
And I was young, and it was a little bit traumatic, but I was like, wow. And now I think like, gosh, would we do, if we knew them? Yes, we do that, I think.
Sure.
But if we didn't know them.
Would you? Right. I don't know too. Like, this is like another aspect of it that we talked about in our group last night. The fear of, if I help them, then they're going to consistently need me.
Yes.
And then I'm going to be their friend for life, and they're always going to call on me. And do you know what I'm talking about there?
Yes, I do. And also kind of like that, but maybe a little worse. So doing the things we do for Brock Strong, I have a pretty good gut. Like, I can meet someone and know like this is good or this is bad. Just a gift. I don't know. I'm usually right. But sometimes I'll meet someone and I'll know immediately like this is not going to be good. Right. And so I always try to say like, I have a one-time ability to do something for your family. And I've had people, especially this one family I'm thinking of right now, like I knew right away that I just had that feeling. And so she has messaged me several times. Once told me that they were going to be homeless if I didn't send them money. A second time that her kids were going to die in the cold if I didn't send them money. And so there are people that will take advantage of you over and over again. And even friends and people not that radical that will just keep
and it's not
needing
just money,
you. No.
Because like we talked about that too. It's like our time, and that's what like Sherry's saying. It's like there's so many people she wants to reach out to, but when you reach out to somebody, that's investing time in them, and that's taking you and your time away from something else that you want to do and that you have as a priority in your life. So it's always like this tension of how much time do I give, and if I give more, are they going to want more? And it's like, as a pastor, like there's so many people that need help, and I can be sensitive and sympathetic, but then it's like almost paralyzed sometimes, like, who do I help? And I shared last night too in my group. I remember a well-known pastor of a mega church, like 20,000 plus people. He said it was when it was early days, smaller, you did everybody's weddings, you met with everybody for counseling. He said, but then it got to the point where it's like, you're a church of that size, you just can't. But he started doing this thing where, once a month he would randomly meet with a person that wanted to meet with a pastor, a random person in the church, or do a wedding for somebody. And his philosophy was do for the one. And sometimes we get paralyzed thinking, I can't do it for everybody. I'm sure with Brock Strong, like you can't do something for everybody that has a need, but you can meet this need and that need, and you can use discernment and say, okay, I'm going to do that. Like when I meet with people that want counseling, it's like I'll meet with everybody once, but I'm not a professional counselor, and I could get bogged down in counseling appointments and not do the rest of my job.
Yeah, I see that a lot in church and a lot with you. I've worked here a long time, and a lot of people come and they want to be BFFs with the pastor, and they may not know anything about you, but they want to be your best friend, and they want you to meet with them and meet all their needs. Or they sit back and maybe they've been in the hospital and we have no idea, but they're mad that we didn't come to visit and no one cares about me. And it's the furthest thing from the truth. Like I tell people all the time when I talk about small groups, like we're not going to know in the office everything that's going on with you, but do you know who will? A smaller group who you pour your life into. Because when you were talking about yesterday, how we have so many surfacey friends and very few really close friends, I find that in me because I want to be friends with everyone. My personality is like, yes, let's go, let's do. But then I end up putting all my time and all my energy into everyone that wants time and energy, and I have nothing left for me. And I find I have very few like true friends who really, really know me, and that's hard.
Yeah, that's not the way. I mean, it's like it's both, right? We need close friends. We also need to care about a lot of people, but everybody can't be. It goes back to the circles conversation we had with the peopleology a year ago. You can only have so many in the little group, and then the next group, and the bigger group. But man, it's a challenging thing.
Yeah, because we're called to love. We're called to love everyone.
Love your neighbor.
Yeah,
that's the whole message yesterday.
Yes.
Your neighbor is everybody.
Right.
So how do you do that well without getting too entangled? Because you can't be everybody's best friend.
Yeah, because someone's going to lose out on that.
That's
like
right.
when you say yes to this, you say no to something else, and that's hard.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think we have these people in the world that some of them like say yes to everything and say no to something, and some people just say no to everything. So I don't like sometimes to give too much of a like, oh, you can say no. Well, you need to be saying yes to something though. You can't just be in your little bubble and not loving beyond your little bubble.
That's right. That's good. That is good. That's hard. Okay, I have a lot of different things, directions we could go, but I one of the things that I like to do this month is to bring up some of the questions from the live podcast. I mentioned I had that we didn't get to. There was like 90 questions submitted back in October, so we've covered a few gradually, and I picked out a few that I thought would be good for you to answer with all of your experience. So for everybody that doesn't know, how long have you been on church staff here?
23 years. I think it'll be 24 this year.
Right, 24 this year, like in December.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
this
was. Let me ask this first. This isn't one of the questions.
Who's my favorite pastor I've worked with?
No, maybe.
You.
I don't know. Should we ask? But in 23 years, you've been through all four pastors, and now I listed what I look at and think about based on our conversations of all the seasons that you went through. And I was wondering, of these seasons, which one was like you would say are your worst ones, and which ones are your favorite ones? And here's what I considered your seasons. Your first season when you first came, and it was the season of the church. It was already started, but it was growing tremendously under the first pastor. So that was like a great season for you, probably, because you grew a lot.
Yeah, I probably grew the most in my life then because our pastor, although he ended up having his faults, was a very good leader. He could look at you and say, Steve, I think that you could pick that car up outside and move it, and you would believe so much you could do it. And I've never had that in my life. I'd worked in corporate America, worked in the medical field with insurance and things like that. And not that I worked with bad people, but I never had anyone who looked at me and said, you can do this. And so I learned so much. Plus, coming into a church world, it was very intimidating.
You in your late 20s?
I was 29.
When you started?
Yeah, so here. 29, started here. I was one of the younger ones, and it was very intimidating. I'd never worked at a church, been a believer most of my life, but really didn't dig into understanding a relationship until probably I was 23. So a fairly new believer and thrown into this staff. So it was all very exciting and new, and I just learned so much. But then towards the end of that, that ended up being
was the next season,
a bad season.
The scandal season, when there was a scandal with the first pastor, and not to get into all those details, but that had to be just mind-boggling for you because somebody you looked up to, you
Yeah.
trusted, they broke that trust, they lied to you, and then you saw the ramifications of that.
Right. And again, I learned so much through that.
Right.
Probably the biggest thing I learned was forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't really ever been through anything like that. And just seeing like that someone could do that and someone in that position, it really taught me that even though you are a pastor, you still are just a human.
Right.
And Satan is looking out for you even more because you falling is going to make a much bigger difference than me or, someone else falling. So I learned that, but I also learned how to forgive because they, had some people that weren't very good to me. And
Yes.
I actually was in the hospital with Brock and he was young, so he didn't need a lot of my attention. I read every scripture on forgiveness and something just clicked with me that day that like, okay, I need to do this for me. And that changed my life too.
That's good. I mean, we don't just learn from the highs; we learn from the lows, and you know that. But so there was a period of time after the scandal where there was another pastor, and it didn't really go well. He was only here for 2 years, and then there was a little bit of decline, and I called it a financially fragile stage.
Yeah.
The church was very fragile financially.
Yeah.
We had just got into the initial building on this property, but the debt was huge. Like 20 people had taken a home equity line out for the church, and you in your position were writing like 20 different checks every month to pay people's minimum payment on their home equity line just to keep the church afloat.
It was rough. I mean, we actually were one of the ones that took out a home equity line because we believed in this church. And so when our first pastor left, and we went 6 months with no pastor, and the whole staff left. It was a big blow up. So it was me and Mark Phillips. That was it. And so Mark spoke on Sunday mornings, and I did everything else. And we had like a volunteer youth guy that helped out. And I just remember sitting down with the North American Mission Board guys who were part of our loan process, and they said, there's no way you should still be a church of, I don't know what we were at the time, 350 or something. Like God wants this church to be here.
Right.
And that just gave me kind of okay, I can get through this, to think that God really could get us here. But it was hard. And like the people fallout was very hard. I'm very relational. And if you meet me and we become friends, and you leave and go somewhere, I'm going to be sad and I'm going to keep up with you. So just seeing I was very careful about my words. I didn't share all the bad things about what was going on because I didn't think that was fair, but not everyone was like that. And so we, me and the couple staff people, we just kind of took it. We took all the negative and wrote it out, and that was hard, not defending yourself. That was so hard. But in the end, it was nice to see people come around and realize that's what was going on.
Yeah, it's hard. One of the things that I've said, and you've seen me as led, you can't share everything that happens behind the scenes with people and air out dirty laundry. And sometimes you take kids for that. And that's not fun.
That's hard.
It is hard. It's hard.
Especially we're both kind of people pleasers.
I know. And I want everybody to like me.
Exactly.
And I want people to know everything that would make them like me more.
Yeah.
But then sometimes you just can't. So after all that, there was a stabilizing force. I think that Pastor Josh was that. And so he was pastor for 5 years before I came. And that was a good period for getting things stabilized. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
It was after all the crazy, it's a good guy, and everything's good. And
it was good because he came in as the student pastor when I first came here, and then through the second pastor and that kind of thing, he kind of came back to be an associate pastor, always wanting to be a professor, never really wanting to be a pastor. So it was good to have him there, kind of going through that with him and being good friends with him. Really helped a lot. I'd be really mad about something and he'd be calm, and then later he would text me really mad, and I'd be like, "I'm calm now."
It's great.
Yeah.
So that season, stability. And then it's about 12 years ago that I came, and we had some growth, and then that was a good period in a building project. So you went through, where we completely renovated and added on to our building. Fun. So there's that project, and you got to experience COVID as a staff member, and then the new post-COVID period that we're in now. So of all those seasons, which one would you say was the worst, the one that you least enjoyed?
I would say the second season, with the second pastor. The first, I probably should say the first pastor, but I just learned so much and grew so much in that. Yeah. And he was a good leader in that he taught me that he should be able to walk away and the church be fine. The church is not about a man, it's about Jesus. And that was huge because then not everyone was really like that. So I think the second was the hardest. I really had to grow up and and realize that people aren't nice.
Right.
That was hard.
Yes.
And realize that even though I was in a church, sometimes things were more scandalous than any kind of corporate America.
Right.
It's different working in a church.
Right.
You're kind of on, everyone, you're on show, you're like in a fishbowl. And not only that, but so is my spouse and my kids. So I kind of learned all of that in that season, and it was hard to learn. I didn't really want to learn
I would have guessed that was your worst, during that period. How about your favorite season so far?
Yeah, I mean, now it's good.
Yeah.
It's real good because I've been doing this for a long time, and we have a great staff, and we all get along and are friends, and we sit and have our own little podcast sometimes.
Right.
So it's nice to have just people like that to come and talk to that aren't going to judge me, and I can ask, any kind of question or talk about any kind of thing. So it's just kind of like a comfortable feel, and to watch the growth and the comeback from COVID. COVID was hard. COVID was hard, like trying to do the right thing. I am such a rule follower, and I wanted to follow all the rules.
That's probably your second worst season.
It was bad. That was so hard to want to do what was best for our people.
It was hard because I think, as much as we're all friends, we felt tension.
Yeah.
Because I just, but I think I knew you were going to be a rule follower, so I would push the limits. But if you said whatever, I'd probably have been like, well, we need to follow some rules here.
Yeah.
So it's really hard because it's for every church, every pastor I talked to, and some didn't survive it. A lot of people quit ministry during that time. So
I tried so hard to think about people first.
Yeah.
And also, unfortunately, I know that bad things can happen to you. I think I lived my life thinking nothing bad's ever going to happen to me because it's just how my life was. Had a pretty good childhood. Everything kind of worked out. And then when everything with Brock happened, that was huge because I didn't think it was going to happen. So now I have this awful thing inside of me where I always know like that could happen.
Right.
So the fact that like we could bring people into church and do whatever we wanted to, and then like half our church die, I just couldn't have lived with myself.
Yeah. Oh, no. Unfortunately, I don't think we had anybody that was a member of our church, family members of some people. But it was just like, is this ever, hopefully never happes again in our lifetime, in any ever lifetime. But I really, like you said, I think I'm more excited about now because we got the building we need, we have the tool, and we're starting to see the growth. The neighborhoods are growing, the church is growing. I just feel like, and something about, I wish I had the energy that we had when we were 30, but the wisdom that we have in the early 50s right now, because of your 23 years here experience, and I've been in ministry 31 years now. It's like you know a lot, and you can just use that to your advantage with a great team that we have. So I'm excited about where we are. So. Though those weren't questions that were part of it, but I just thought people would enjoy hearing that. So here's one. Somebody asked this question. I'd love to have you answer this instead of me. Knowing it is not our job to judge or condemn, how do we still encourage and challenge our brothers and sisters in Christ in their walk with Jesus so they don't remain stagnant? Yeah. So we see people get stagnant all the time. People who are followers of Jesus get stagnant. How do we encourage them or challenge them without sounding judgmental or condemning?
I think that's a hard question, and it's a hard thing to do because we live in the world of lots of opportunity, lots of things to take your time up.
Yes,
you can fill your calendar in a heartbeat and leave out the things that's important, like Jesus and church. And I do that sometimes. Like I am someone who I love to have a quiet time in the morning and read some kind of thing in the Bible and a little devotion, and my day goes better. But if I'm pushed for time, it's the first thing to go. And I don't know why. Like we talk about that in my Bible study all the time. Like, why do we do that? Like we know it's good, we know it's important, and yet we push it right out of our life to fill it with what? Something that's temporary. So I think the biggest thing is just pushing them to make some kind of time for God, and not get wrapped up in all the things of this world, which is not an easy thing to do. Like I said, there's so many things to fill our time, and I think you've talked about before, if you ask someone like what's the most important thing in their life, and they'll say, Jesus or God or whatever, but then you look at your checkbook and your calendar and that shows you what's the most important thing. And so to try not to judge those people, because it's easy to do, and I've done it and I can do it easily, but just to encourage them that there's so much more. And like
this isn't the question, but I think we see people that disappear for a period of time, not just because of COVID, but, and they suddenly reappear, and they're nervous because they think we're going to judge them and be
Yes.
angry, like, where have you been? But that's not how we feel.
No.
We're just happy.
Yeah, I hate when I see someone who's been gone a long time and they're like, give me all these reasons. Like, you don't owe that to me. Or if
Yeah.
someone leaves because they just don't want to come to church here anymore, like,
Right.
I don't care. Just go to church somewhere.
Right.
Get involved somewhere.
That's right.
We're all kind of on the same team.
That's the way I used to be, I think 10 to 15, 20 years ago, I used to be more bothered by that. But I realized sometimes people are here for a season, and then, for whatever reason, it could be their kids, it could be their family, it could be their neighborhood they live in, or somebody they're close to invites them to another church, and nothing negative. They just feel like that's where they need to be now. Just be in church, be growing, be in a place where you're going to get closer to the Lord. But the stagnation can set in on any of us.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we don't have the option, really. I mean, it'll show up very fast if our relationship with the Lord is bad. But it's so easy. And I've seen people recently back, and I'm so happy to see them. We're not condemning, but we want you to know it matters.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
I think the best way you can do it is with your life, like how you live your life.
Yeah.
And if people see what you're doing and they see that she has something I want, he has something
Yes.
I want, and then they realize that it's God. And
Yes.
it's, I think that's huge because I've always heard preach the Bible and use words if you have to.
Yes.
Like, I believe that's so true that people get more from
That's
how
your
we're
life.
living
Yeah.
than how we preach at them. Now, of course, we need to know the Bible so we can live that way.
Right.
And God can use anyone.
Yes.
So I think sometimes they get down when they've got stagnant or maybe not really walked away, but like have just not done anything.
Yes.
And then I think they just want to give up. You're on a diet and you have like a few bad days. So you're like, just forget it. I'm going to eat whatever I want. Yeah.
Talking about me, my January was good.
So I just think
Yeah.
it's so important to say, like, God can use anyone.
Yeah.
And even like you read the story of David, and we know he's a man with the heart of God and all
Yes.
these good things, but he did some really
He did
bad
some-
things.
yes, he did.
And he repented of those things, and he didn't do them again. And God forgave him and used him for like one of the greatest men in the Bible,
Yes.
who really messed up. And we just don't think about that. We think, oh, well, that's you or whatever. So I also think it's good to share like our failures. I'm not saying go on Facebook and put all your failures
Yes,
out there,
right.
but like with the people that that are in your circle, so they can see that you're not perfect and
Right.
you've come around through things, and you'll
Right.
probably go back down the drain again.
Yeah.
But God can still use you, and don't give up.
That's really good advice. I think it's interesting what you're saying, because it really, I think, connects to, I'm going to skip to this other question because I really feel like it goes along with that. This was a longer question somebody submitted. They said, we're a crazy, busy family of 5, 3 kids, ages 15, 13, and 11, who are all doing different sports and activities throughout the week. Due to everyone's schedules, it's easy to lose focus on God throughout the week. What are some ways as a family that we could reconnect with God during our busy schedules?
I was a big
Yeah.
little kid devotion time at dinner.
Okay.
And my kids loved it and ate it up. My son's a worship leader now, so
Right,
I think they've
right.
kind of always had it in.
Right.
But finding ways to put it in, or when your kids are struggling through something, stop it, and they're mad at one of their friends,
Mm-hmm.
stopping and pray for their friend. That's huge, because it's the last thing you want to do when you're mad at
Exactly.
someone.
Yes.
Well, I believe it's really hard to be mad at someone you're praying for them. So just kind of like sticking those things in. Again, people think we're crazy. We have no time. We don't have time to sit down and do a 2-hour devotion. We don't have to do that.
Right.
You just sprinkle it in here and there. And I just hate that society is so making us busy. And I hate Sunday opportunities the most. Like,
Right.
I hate that there's sports on Sunday. Now, I had a
Yes.
travel baseball player. He also played fall ball. And when it moved to a Sunday, we pulled him out of
Right.
fall ball. It was a
Right.
very unpopular opinion,
Right.
because my husband coached. And so
Right.
we're taking the coach, and Brock was just awesome and bubbly, and everyone loved him. So we took him out because of that. So we were like the weird church people and that kind of thing. But I just told my kids, like, we're never going to commit to something that will make us miss all these Sundays. Like,
Right.
there's so many other opportunities to do
Right.
it. So I hate that people put that pressure on kids. Like, if you don't do this, your kid's never going to be a D1 baseball player. Well,
Right.
guess what? They're probably not going to be that
Probably
anyway.
not. I coach baseball, and
Yes.
even for the school. And it came up in our group last night. And one thing I do appreciate about at least the school season, there is no Sundays stuff at all.
Yeah.
And almost all school sports don't interfere with Sundays. But then you get to the travel stuff. And that goes back to the last question. It's not our job to judge and
Right.
condemn people that do that. But our concern is for their spiritual progress as a family, for their spiritual health as a family. And
Because most of them are exhausted.
they are exhausted.
They are mentally
Yeah.
and spiritually exhausted. And so you have a choice. Like, sometimes I get like that where I'm like, oh my gosh, my calendar's so full. And I'm like, Christy, you have written everything on this calendar in pencil so you could erase it.
Right.
But you have written this on your calendar. You are making these choices. So you either need to put your heart into it and do it or don't do it.
Right.
And people feel like, well, I have no choice. Like you always have a choice. But there's so many opportunities even within that to sprinkle in things about God to your kids. And it's so important because they have a hard time growing up. It is so much harder in school than we're in school.
It is.
And, again, teaching them not to judge, like the last question, but just to love.
But the focus on the relationship with Christ. So if you're in a kid on a sports team and they're playing on weekend tournaments, you can't really be on a team and say, well, I'm not going to do Sundays ever.
Right.
It's hard. But I do think that, like you did with Brock, there's limitations you can put on it. And you can say, we're not going to do this year round. I mean, we have, I have a kid who's doing that, but it's like there's these 2 months that are rough. And sometimes it's a mix of weekends. You never know. I mean, I'm always here. But, I think what some people do is they just get into the peer pressure of everybody else in their lives that are in that world that don't have a relationship with God. And they're like, well, everybody's doing this. And it's just like, I got to do the best for my kid.
I don't want to miss out. I don't want them to be left behind.
The fear of missing out for my kid.
Then they're so exhausted that even if their game's at 3 on Sunday, they can't come to church because they got to prepare for that. Like, what kind of lives are we living that we're running ourselves ragged like that?
No, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. But like you said, though, for this question, I think it's not just Sunday, it's a lifestyle. Yeah. And so whenever you have opportunities to pray with your child, to talk about how God used that other kid that you're mad at school, all the things that happen in our schools where they're hearing all kinds of garbage that is not biblical, because it's, we're not, unless your kid's at a Christian school, they're going to hear things, and the worldview is different than
even those
Christian
kids will
worldview.
Hear it.
Well, they'll hear it too.
Just not as much.
They won't hear it from the teachers per se, but the even what's being taught and all that, we have to have conversations all the time with our children about what they're learning, about what they're hearing, and about what God's view of that is. So you can't expect, if you do make it to church every Sunday, that hour is going to be enough. And
they're watching you so much. They're watching your words, your decisions, your actions. Right. They're watching how you react when you have a conflict with a friend. And then, sometimes you see that out in a positive way or a negative way in your kids. And I think that's huge. Like, I think TikTok videos are funny when little kids are cussing. Now, I would have killed my kids. Yeah. But you're like, they're hearing that somewhere to say those words. My kids don't even know what those words are. And so they're listening and they're soaking up everything we do. So again, preaching the Bible through your actions to your kids is huge.
Right. No, absolutely. So 2 other questions that are a little more random, but I think you'd have good answers to potentially. So what advice would you give to a person who's struggling socially to get involved in the church and make new friends?
Yeah, that's hard. Yeah. And I'm very extroverted. Like, I'm going to be the annoying person to that person. Like, hi! Yeah. I say you just have to put yourself out there. And if you're struggling socially, I see it like with the ages too, but all ages really. Find people that have likeness like you. Like the first easiest step would be to get into a small group. Like if you get in a small group, you're automatically going to have people that at least on Sunday morning and you can see, or go to, if you're a woman, I hear women say, I don't know how to get involved. Right. Like go to one of the women's events. You're going to meet someone, and the next time you go to church, you're going to see that face and they're going to be like, hey, the marriage retreat, so many people met people. I never knew anyone, and now I know so many people. Like we try to give a lot of opportunities here, but we just talked about your calendar. You don't really need us to add on more opportunities. But small groups are huge, and we're pretty good about making sure that you're in a small group with people around ish your same age. We're not going to put you with people that have little kids, and because what are you going to hang out with them or whatever. So we're pretty good at that, and just trying it, like, especially if you're an introvert, I know that that's draining for you, but if you're feeling that pull that you want to meet people, that's a great way. Get involved in a ministry. You're kind of busy, so I think that's a little less of a way to really make friendships and relationships.
Depends on which ministry it is.
Yes. If you're at the front door with someone for 20 minutes, you're going to make friends with them.
And if you serve like in a kids ministry or a student ministry, they become kind of a team.
They do.
And so there's so many opportunities like that, I think. But it's hard. It's easy for us to say. And I think either one of us could go in Like if we weren't here tomorrow and went to a new church, we would make friends.
Yeah.
Because that's our nature, to be extroverted and to just go up and talk to people and find people. But for some people, they do struggle with that more. But you can't just come to church and sit in the back row and not talk to people and expect something to happen.
Right. And if I know that person, I feel like obligated to be their friend, their person, or, you know, and when really maybe I'm not the right person to be that. So I'm like, if you're feeling that pull, then put yourself out there. The thing I hate the most is when someone's like, oh, I come to church and nobody talks to me. And I'm like, we have a pretty friendly church.
Right.
Like, are you trying to talk to anyone? Or are you like very closed off, or you look like, because some people come and they don't want to be talked to, and that's fine too. If that's what you want to do. But if you're looking closed off or unapproachable, then people probably aren't going to approach you. I hate when people are like, no one talk to me.
That is funny because on Sunday mornings, I try to make it a point for me before services, like the last 5 minutes before the service begins, I just walk around the auditorium and try to say hi to as many people as possible. And it's funny because it's much easier to go up to people that are smiling and say hi. Then there's some like, do I really want to go? Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, just the mad face, the angry, like I don't want to be here face. And that's not maybe how they feel, but some people have that kind of face sometimes, so they don't realize what they're projecting. But if I am nervous about talking to you like that, the average person is not going to want to talk to you.
And it's a lot to put on the staff. So people know.
There's only a few of us.
Yeah. You, me, Jared, Mitch, who are on stage a lot, Amy. And so you can't expect us to be your only friends. Because on Sunday morning, you never know what I'm going to be doing. I was unplugging toilets 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly.
So like I feel like I'm always running around. And so if I miss someone, I don't ever want them to feel like, oh, she just didn't talk to me. I probably just didn't see you. I try really hard to talk to everyone walking out every week. But we're not perfect. And you can't just put all that on us. Get out there and meet someone else.
I mean, we're as much as extroverts, we are. All the staff is very task driven as well, and we have to-do lists and we have things that have to be logistically done on Sunday. So sometimes I even mentioned that I think yesterday in preaching. Just sometimes you walk past people real fast because you're going to do something, and they can be like, "Oh, they didn't even look at me or speak to me today." Yeah. Well, somebody else has to do that too. It can't be on us. But it is like a person who has friends must show himself friendly.
Yes.
But I'm not putting that all on you, but on the other person. But all right, here's the last one.
Okay.
This is, what would you say to a seeker who says, "I tried Jesus, but it didn't work"? Somebody asked this question, and I think that this question is real. There's people that try church. They've come, maybe once, twice, and they're like, it didn't really mean much to me.
Gosh, I would really want to have a conversation with that person. I would want to say, I'm the kind of person that I love having conversations like this and digging deep. And I really love to understand why someone feels that way. Right. So I'd want to say, like, what happened that made you feel that way? What were your expectations and what happened? Right. And, life is hard. And just because you accept Christ, some people think that then, first of all, that person's perfect and everything goes well in their life. I am living proof that that's not the truth. And everyone is. Like, even when we get down sometimes, like I remember praying the other day, like, I feel like everyone just lets me down. God, I feel like you let me down when Brock passed away. Right. What's the point of all this? Like, everyone gets that way. Right. But that's the whole thing with faith in Jesus. And if you just know his story enough to know how he came and what he did for us, and he didn't have it easy. Like, he had horrible things happen and every reason to quit and say, God, I tried to do this, but I'm done. I quit. This wasn't easy. What's your alternative to that is my other question. Like, if you tried it and you gave it up, then what's your other alternative? And the movie, the Jesus Revolution movie, they were all doing acid or whatever drug it was. Right. And they were trying to find, that was their whole thing. It was like they were trying to find God in that. They didn't really know that
would fill them.
Yes. Right. They kept trying to find it and it just didn't work. Like, that eventually was like, I tried that and it didn't work. And they just kept trying until they found Jesus. But it's hard because it'd be so much easier if Jesus was sitting across from me and we could talk and I could look into his eyes and he could say, "Christy, this is what you need to do." Yeah. And we get that in still small voices and different ways. Right. And that is hard. So I understand why anyone would feel that way.
I do think the first thing you said is the best, is the have a conversation, because I don't think there's a set answer to this question. What would you say? I tried and didn't work. Well, I have to know more about that person. Yes. You mentioned what's happening in their life. I would also go back, like, what happened? Like, how'd you grow up? What did you grow up hearing? What was your family like? what did you go to church as a kid? Because like I know you were leading into that. Something happened maybe that turned them off to church. For some reason they tried Jesus.
Also,
what does
like,
that
tell
mean?
me what that means.
What does that mean?
Did you go to church one time?
Yeah, because what if you came on a Sunday and the message was, the series we just did, The Gods of Marriage, and we talked about something, and you're like, that doesn't really apply to me. I'm single, or whatever. You could easily say that was trying Jesus.
The general person doesn't get like completely hook, line, and sinker in one service. There are people that come and God just speaks to them. I believe that wholeheartedly, and their life has changed in the very first service. But I think that's few and far between. So what do you mean you tried? Like, did you try to learn about Jesus? Did you, reading the Bible sounds very intimidating for a new believer. Did you at least like get a devotion? Did you talk to someone about stuff?
Yes.
Did you, what do you mean by try?
I try. Yeah, I think too, I remember way back in when I was in school, one of the classes about evangelism, I think it was saying that it usually takes at least 7 touches before someone accepts Christ. And there's all the pre-salvation stages, and seeking Christ, like you need more than just one service. You need other people to speak to you. Trying Jesus doesn't usually happen. You can't, like you said, one service isn't enough usually for somebody. And so I think you need to give it a try longer. I always tell people to, come back, listen for multiple weeks, ask questions. Who brought you? Ask them questions. I've seen, like, even in our small group last night, I was encouraged because we got into this Good Samaritan discussion. And then we got into the question of Jesus answered this lawyer, what must I do to have eternal life? And he said, well, what do you think? And he said, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor. And he said, do that and you'll do well. Like, well, that's not. Eternal life isn't by doing stuff. It's by believing in Jesus. So why did Jesus give him that answer? It was like a good question. And then one of the people who was newer to the church that's in my group said, well, that goes back to what we studied in our group in the fall when we went through the book of James, that it's not just faith, but it's faith and good works. I was like, oh my goodness.
You're like I'm a good teacher.
Yes, you're getting it. And that was really good because that was the perfect answer, because Jesus kind of, and this goes right into this thing, he customized his answer for that person. Because that person knew the law and was going to believe the right things. But if you believe the right things, but it doesn't change the way you treat people and the way you live, then you don't have real faith.
Right.
So it's not like, so often we've thought about it, maybe the way I grew up too, was like, here's the steps to salvation, here's the steps to all this. But each person's different. Salvation's the same. We're not going to have a different form of salvation or different doctrine for different people, but understanding how they come to Christ, we all come to Christ differently. But it's the same plan of salvation, the same beliefs. But
yeah, I think it's heartbreaking when you see that in someone. Like I've seen it in someone, a younger person that came here and was here every week and trying all the things and like got broken up with.
Yeah.
And devastated.
Yes.
And so kind of felt like, okay, I tried this and it didn't work. Look where that left me. I get that. I think about losing Brock, and if I didn't have my faith before Brock, I don't know how I would get through it. I don't know how I would ever have faith. So I get that. And the problem is they're young in their faith, so they don't understand that God says, it's not going to be easy. I'm just always going to be here. He doesn't tell you like you're never going to have problems. He just says, I'm going to be here and this world's just a blip. But if you're a new believer, you don't know that yet. And so my heart breaks. Like those people need people in their life to pour into them. And then when they don't have that, that's even more heartbreaking. And when like I can't be that person for them, that's even more heartbreaking. And that's where I just feel stuck. Like, I don't know how to help this person. I see what they feel. I understand it 100%. And they just need people in their life to help them get through and learn about faith and learn about Jesus. And my other question always is, what's the alternative?
I know
you're still broken up with.
But like, I think, like I'd rather take a chance on Jesus and the whole thing being real than take a chance on being wrong about this. And the question is, what would you say? And I would say to this person, not to the seeker, but to the person asking the question, don't give up on them. Like, keep planting seeds, keep speaking to them about it, keep inviting them. They might have come to church with you and said, it didn't work for me. But, Easter's coming. They might come again. A lot of people that have given up will still go to church on Easter. And you never know when there's going to be a breakthrough. So we've seen it with people. And I think that's the most important thing. Don't give up. And I used to feel more pressure on this type of question to like, I got to win them to the Lord. But listen, it's not our job to do that. That's the Holy Spirit. We plant the seeds. God, convicts through the Holy Spirit in their life, whether they come to Christ or not, is not on us.
Yeah, don't take that on, because you're not that important that God can't still reach that person without you.
Yes.
You know?
I've been there where I've been like, oh, I was trying to win this person, and then somebody else did.
Yeah.
It used to be like, oh man, I wanted to, but you know what? I was part of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's not about that. It's about building the kingdom. So, any closing thoughts that you would have from anything that you wanted to say today?
No, all good questions.
Yeah.
I love that people
Yeah.
are asking questions because they want to know, and it's a safe, anonymous place to ask. They may not ask somewhere. I love questions. I love having conversations
Yes.
like that
Yes.
with people.
Yeah.
I would encourage anyone listening, be aware when you hear things like that people are just asking for insight. And even if you don't have all the right answers,
Right.
if you love and if your heart's in the right place,
Yes.
then God can use you.
Yes. Well, thank you. You have shared your wisdom with us today. And I know sometimes you're like, yeah, what do I have to say? But you have a lot to say. And I know this will probably be one of our highest rated podcasts because we have Christy Johnson, the longest
So everybody
standing
share
staff
that
member.
so I can
Share
say my
that.
two.
Yes, share that. And so, because she's very competitive and she's going to watch how many views there are. So share it with as many
Call
people
on my
as
family,
possible.
call your family.
And maybe one of our
Jared's mom loves me. I'm going to tell her.
Yes, I'm sure. One of the things that happens sometimes is what we talk about spurs on another question. So you can submit questions to podcast@sycamorecreek.org, and it might be something we could talk about in a future podcast. But again, thank you for watching today. Christy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was fun. We had a great time, and I don't know how long we went. Maybe we were longer than last week with my dad. Jared said that was the longest one so far.
I mean, your dad has a lot of wisdom.
He does, and I heard a lot of people that really enjoyed listening to him.
Yes.
So anyway, we have another guest coming next week, but thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the In All Things podcast. Our challenge for you today is to send this episode to one person. Seriously, think of somebody right now that could use this conversation and send it to them. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic ideas, please send them to podcast@sycamorecreek.org, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sycamore Creek Church so that you can always see what's going on in our world. If this conversation helped you at all, make sure you share it, leave a review, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on a single episode. We love you, God loves you, and we'll see you next week on the In All Things podcast.